Looking back, I see my life was a carefully constructed photograph, a still image of suburban contentment. My name is Derek, and for the better part of a decade, I believed I was married to my soulmate. Her name was Sophia. Together, we had built a life that seemed untouchable, a cozy, well-appointed home in a neighborhood where the lawns were always green and the silence was only broken by the distant laughter of children. We had a thriving social circle, a curated collection of couples just like us. We had a bond that I thought was forged in something stronger than steel. I guess life has a way of pulling the rug out from under you just when you get comfortable, just when you stop checking to see if the floor is still there. Sophia and I met at a wedding. It feels almost offensively cliché to say it now, but at the time, it felt like fate. She was the maid of honor, a radiant, shimmering vision in a pale blue dress that seemed to have been spun from the summer sky itself. I was just another guy in a rented tuxedo, a nameless guest trying to navigate the treacherous waters of small talk and forced merriment without embarrassing myself on the dance floor. She approached me first. Of course she did. I was standing near the bar, a study in awkward stillness, when she glided over, a champagne flute in her hand and a smile that could light up a room. She was confident, witty, incandescent. I was hooked from the moment she teased me about my stiff, rhythmic swaying during a slow song, which she generously called my two-step. Our love story unfolded like a movie montage, a series of beautifully lit scenes that, in retrospect, feel like they happened to someone else. Dates turned into weekends. Weekends turned into a shared apartment, and before I knew it, I was down on one knee on a windswept overlook in the mountains, a small velvet box in my trembling hand. Sophia said yes through a cascade of happy tears, and we spent the next decade building what I genuinely believed was a strong, loving, and immutable marriage. She worked as a high-end event planner, a career that was a perfect extension of her personality. She orchestrated beauty, managed chaos, and charmed everyone she met. I, on the other hand, was the quiet anchor to her magnificent ship. I ran my own architectural design business from a studio in our home, a life of quiet precision, of blueprints and stress calculations. We complemented each other, or so the story went. Her vibrant, social energy balanced my more reserved, introspective demeanor. She was the party. I was the home we came back to. But now, as I sit here, trying to reconstruct the timeline of our collapse, I can't help but feel like I was a fool. A willing, blind fool. The cracks were forming beneath the surface for years, hairline fractures in the foundation, and I chose not to see them. The primary, most significant crack had a name, Chris. He had been a constant, immutable presence in Sophia's life since long before I came along. He was the childhood friend, the keeper of her secrets, the platonic soulmate, as she used to joke. At first, I didn't mind. In fact, I liked him. Chris was charming, funny, and possessed a preternatural ability to make everyone around him feel at ease. He was a fixture at all our gatherings, from casual backyard barbecues to formal holiday dinners, always acting like a cherished, honorary member of the family. I had no reason to distrust him, or Sophia. I thought I understood their dynamic. They were history. They had navigated the treacherous landscapes of adolescence together, survived high school, college, bad breakups, and career struggles. Chris was the kind of friend who could call her at 2 in the morning after a bad dream, and I wouldn't bat an eye. I wanted to trust them, not just because I loved Sophia, but because trust was the very bedrock of the life I thought we were building. But over time, things started to feel off. It was a subtle shift in the atmosphere, a change in the pressure that I couldn't quite name. It was the little things, at first. Sophia laughing a little too loud, a little too long, at one of Chris's jokes. The way their inside jokes seemed to multiply with every visit, a secret, impenetrable language that left me on the outside looking in. They had a shorthand, a silent communication that passed between them in a shared glance or a subtle smirk. At our own parties, I would often find them in a corner, their heads close together, whispering and laughing about something no one else was privy to. I was the host, and I felt like an intruder. I told myself it was harmless. This was just the nature of their deep, decades-long friendship. I was being sensitive, territorial. But the nagging feeling in the pit of my stomach, a cold, hard knot of unease, didn't go away. Sophia had a gift for making our house feel like a home. It was always warm, welcoming, filled with the scent of fresh flowers and the low hum of good music. She loved to host, and our home was often the epicenter of our social circle. And Chris, of course, was always there. Often, he was the first to arrive and the last to leave, staying behind to help Sophia clean up, the two of them moving around the kitchen in a comfortable, practiced rhythm while I, exhausted from a long night of socializing, would retreat to bed. It didn't help that Chris was so effortlessly charismatic. He had this knack for turning any situation into something fun, for charming the old and the young, the cynical and the sincere. It made it easy for people, myself included, to overlook the more insidious aspects of his presence. But as time went on, I started to see the subtle ways he inserted himself, not just into our social life, but into the very architecture of our marriage. It wasn't just his constant presence. It was the way he seemed to have an opinion on everything. The furniture we bought, the color we painted the living room, the vacations we planned. And Sophia would listen to him, defer to his taste, with a seriousness she rarely afforded my own suggestions. On the surface, everything seemed fine. We had just celebrated our 9th anniversary with a trip to the coast. Sophia, the consummate event planner, had gone all out, arranging a romantic dinner at a cliffside restaurant overlooking the ocean. But even then, even in that perfect, curated moment of romance, I noticed how often her phone buzzed with messages. I noticed how her face would light up, a quick, private smile, whenever Chris's name appeared on the screen. Still, I told myself I was overthinking it. I was manufacturing a problem where none existed. This was Sophia, my wife, the woman who had held my hand through my father's funeral, who had celebrated my every small success as if it were her own. Surely, she wouldn't betray the life we had built, this beautiful, solid thing. But hindsight is a cruel and unforgiving teacher. Looking back, the signs were all there, scattered like breadcrumbs, leading to a truth I wasn't ready to face. I just didn't know it yet. I was admiring the photograph, completely oblivious to the fact that the edges were already starting to burn. Chris had always been there. It's a simple fact, a foundational truth of my life with Sophia. He was a piece of the architecture, a supporting beam I had never thought to inspect for structural integrity. He was Sophia's best friend since grade school, the fun, slightly irreverent uncle to our social circle, a fixture at every major and minor event in our lives. I had never questioned his place. Why would I? He was charming, outgoing, and had a way of making himself indispensable. He was just Chris. When Sophia and I first got married, Chris was like an extension of our relationship. He was the guy who helped us move furniture into our first apartment, the one who always brought the best bottle of wine to dinner parties, the person Sophia turned to for advice on everything from career moves to difficult clients. He'd even helped us pick out the paint colors for our living room, a soft, warm gray that he had insisted was sophisticated but not stuffy. I should have found it odd, a man taking such a keen interest in the domestic details of his best friend's marriage. But I didn't. Back then, I trusted him. I trusted her. He was part of the family. Or so I thought. It wasn't until the past year or so that I started to notice the shift. It was a gradual, almost imperceptible change in the dynamics. Chris went from being a supportive, peripheral friend to being everywhere. He was at our house more than ever, stopping by unannounced with some flimsy excuse. Asterisk, just in the neighborhood. Thought you'd like this book I just finished. Needed to borrow a tool. Asterisk. At first, I didn't mind. I'm a man who works from home. The occasional interruption was a welcome distraction. I figured he was lonely, perhaps, or going through something he didn't want to talk about. I offered him a beer, made small talk, and didn't think much of it. But then there were the inside jokes. Chris and Sophia had always shared a shorthand, a language of shared memories. But lately, it felt like they were speaking a different dialect entirely. At dinner parties, they'd be off in a corner, their heads close together, laughing at something no one else understood. During group conversations, he'd finish her sentences, and she'd look at him with this knowing, conspiratorial smile that made me feel like an outsider in my own home, at my own table. One evening, we were hosting a casual game night with a few other couples. I was in the middle of explaining the rules of a new, complicated card game when Chris made some offhand joke about how Sophia always cheats. She burst out laughing, a loud, uninhibited sound, and nudged him playfully with her elbow. Don't expose my secrets. It seemed harmless. But the way they exchanged that glance, a quick, intimate flash of shared history, like they were the only two people in on a secret that the rest of us couldn't possibly understand, it set my teeth on edge. After everyone had left, and I was helping her clear the dishes, I brought it up. Does Chris have to be here all the time? I asked, my voice a carefully constructed imitation of casualness. Sophia frowned, her hands pausing in the soapy water. She was clearly taken aback. What are you talking about? He's my best friend. He's always been around. Yeah, but lately it feels like he's too around, I said, struggling to articulate the formless, nagging feeling. She rolled her eyes, a gesture of impatient dismissal that stung. You're being ridiculous, Derek. Chris is like family. Don't be weird about it. I dropped it. I didn't want to start a fight. I didn't want to be the jealous, insecure husband. But her defensiveness, the quick, sharp edge in her voice, only amplified my unease. Things escalated when Sophia started relying on Chris for things she used to turn to me for. Our 10th anniversary was approaching, a milestone I was genuinely excited about. One afternoon, I found her on the phone, laughing and brainstorming ideas. That was Chris, she said when she hung up. We're planning your surprise anniversary gift together. Her tone was light, playful. I tried to match it. Shouldn't that be something you handle? Isn't it bad luck for the best friend to be involved? I was only half joking. She just winked, a gesture that was meant to be cute but felt dismissive. Oh, don't worry. Chris knows you almost as well as I do. He's got some great ideas. That statement hit me harder than it should have. Knows me almost as well as you do. Was that supposed to be reassuring? It felt like a demotion, like I was no longer the primary shareholder in my own life. The final straw, the moment my vague unease solidified into a cold, hard certainty that something was wrong, came on a random Thursday night. I was working late in my home office, trying to finish a set of blueprints. I heard laughter coming from the living room, a soft, intimate sound. Curious, I walked out to find Sophia and Chris sitting on the couch, their bodies angled towards each other, a laptop open between them. They were sitting way too close, their shoulders almost touching. What's so funny? I asked, trying to sound casual, trying to pretend my heart wasn't pounding in my chest. Chris just smirked, a quick, unreadable flash of his teeth. Sophia waved a dismissive hand in my direction, her eyes not leaving the screen. Just work stuff. Chris is helping me brainstorm some ideas for a client's event. At that moment, standing in the doorway of my own living room, watching them in their cozy, self-contained world, I felt an overwhelming sense of being excluded, of being irrelevant. This wasn't just a friendship anymore. It was something else, something deeper, something that didn't have room for me. I was the third wheel in my own marriage. Looking back, I wish I had trusted my instincts then. I wish I had had the courage to confront the ugly truth that was taking shape right in front of me. Chris wasn't just her best friend. He was a wedge, a slow, patient, charming wedge, driving himself deliberately and methodically between us. And the worst part, the part that still keeps me up at night, is that I didn't see it for what it was until it was too late. I wanted to believe that Sophia loved me, that Chris was harmless, that our marriage was unshakable. But as their connection grew stronger, I couldn't help but feel like I was watching everything I had built slowly, deliberately, being pulled apart. And the man who was supposed to be like family, he was the one holding the crowbar. The thing about red flags is that they rarely scream for your attention. They don't announce themselves with sirens and flashing lights. Instead, they whisper. They are small, quiet moments of dissonance, of things that don't quite add up. They plant seeds of doubt that, if you're not careful, slowly, silently take root in the fertile ground of your insecurities. At first, they're easy to ignore. You tell yourself you're imagining things. You're overthinking. You're being paranoid. But eventually, those whispers grow louder, more insistent, until they become a roaring in your ears that is impossible to ignore. With Sophia and Chris, the whispers began as little things, moments I could rationalize away, moments I chose to rationalize away. The way her face would light up, a sudden, unguarded incandescence, when he entered a room. The way their inside jokes became so frequent, so esoteric, that I couldn't even pretend to keep up. The way she started dressing differently, a subtle but noticeable shift in her style, on the days she knew he'd be around. I didn't want to believe it. This was Sophia, my wife, My partner for nearly a decade. The woman whose laughter was the soundtrack to my life. And Chris, he was her best friend. Her brother in all but blood. Practically part of the family. The thought of anything more between them felt not just improbable, but profane. But slowly, relentlessly, the whispers turned into a roar. It started with her appearance. Sophia had always been naturally beautiful, with a casual, effortless elegance that didn't require much fuss. But recently, she seemed more deliberate. Her makeup, once a quick, minimalist routine, was now more polished, more precise. Her outfits were more tailored, her perfume stronger, a new, more exotic scent that was a departure from the light, familiar florals she had worn for years. New look, I asked one morning, as she stood in front of the mirror, carefully applying a shade of lipstick that was bolder, redder, than her usual muted tones. She smiled, a quick, practiced glance at me in the reflection. Just trying something different. You like it? Of course, I said, though my tone was hesitant. I did like it. She looked incredible, but I couldn't shake the nagging, ugly feeling that her audience wasn't me. The changes were subtle, but undeniable. Sophia had always been confident, but now there was a new energy about her, a kind of restless, glittering vivacity that didn't seem to include me. It felt like she was performing for someone else. Then there were the phone calls. Sophia had always been glued to her phone, but it was usually for work, or scrolling through Pinterest, or group chats with her girlfriends. Now, her conversations seemed to be dominated by one person. I'd walk into the room, and she'd quickly lower her voice, or turn the screen away from me with a furtive, almost unconscious movement. What's so secretive? I teased one night, trying to sound playful, trying to hide the knot of anxiety in my stomach. She was on the couch, laughing at something on her phone. Nothing, she said, quickly locking the screen. Chris just sent a meme. You wouldn't get it. It's one of our inside jokes. Her casual dismissal stung more than she could have known. You wouldn't get it. It was a small thing, a throwaway line, but it felt like a door being quietly but firmly closed in my face. I forced a smile and let it slide. The real turning point, the moment my own best friend confirmed I wasn't losing my mind, came during a backyard barbecue at our house. Liam, my friend since college, a man who valued brutal honesty over social niceties, pulled me aside while I was manning the grill. Hey man, he started, his voice low, his eyes serious. Can I ask you something? Sure, I said, flipping a burger. What's going on with Sophia and Chris? He asked, his gaze fixed on the patio, where they stood, heads close together, laughing about something I couldn't hear. What do you mean? I asked, feigning ignorance, my heart sinking. He raised an eyebrow, a look that said, don't play dumb with me. You don't see it? The way they're always, I don't know, orbiting each other? It feels weird, man. It's not just a friendship. I tried to brush it off, to defend her, to defend us. They've been friends forever, Liam. That's just how they are. He just shook his head, a look of pity in his eyes. All right, man. But don't be the last one to see it. His words lingered long after the party was over, a cold, heavy weight in my chest. The whispers turned into a dull roar the night Sophia came home late. She'd been out with Chris, planning my surprise anniversary party, as she had put it. Sorry I'm late, she said, breezing into the kitchen, her cheeks flushed, her eyes bright. Everything okay? I asked, my voice carefully neutral. Of course, she said, flashing me a brilliant smile. Chris had some great ideas for the party. You're going to love it. I nodded, but my stomach churned. The party wasn't the problem. It was the way she said his name. The way her face lit up when she talked about him. The way she seemed more alive, more vibrant, after an evening with him than she ever did with me anymore. I tried to bring it up a few days later, choosing my words with the care of a bomb disposal expert. Do you think you're spending a little too much time with Chris? I asked, my tone as casual as I could manage. She frowned, setting down her coffee cup with a sharp click. What's that supposed to mean? Nothing, I said quickly. It's just, you've been seeing a lot of him lately. More than usual. She rolled her eyes, her defensiveness an immediate, impenetrable wall. He's my best friend, Derek. We're planning your anniversary surprise. Why are you being so weird about it? Her reaction, the quick, sharp accusation that I was the one being weird, caught me off guard. I didn't push further. The final, glaring, impossible to ignore red flag came at a dinner party we hosted for a few close friends. I stepped outside for a moment to grab a bottle of wine from the garage. When I returned, the kitchen was empty, save for Sophia and Chris. Their heads were close together, their voices a low, intimate murmur. She was laughing softly, her hand resting lightly, naturally, on his arm. "Everything okay in here?" I asked, my voice sharper than I intended. They both looked up, startled, like two teenagers caught doing something they shouldn't. "Just talking about the playlist," Sophia said quickly, her hand dropping from his arm, her cheeks a little too pink. Chris just smirked, that same infuriating, unreadable smirk. I forced a smile and walked away, but the image of them, of her hand on his arm, was burned into my mind. Looking back, I realized I ignored the signs for far too long. I wanted to believe in Sophia. I wanted to believe in our marriage. I wanted to believe in the life we had built. But the red flags were there, no longer whispering, but screaming. And deep down, in a place I didn't want to admit existed, I knew something was terribly, irrevocably wrong. I just didn't want to be the one to turn on the lights and see the full extent of the damage. The day started like any other anniversary. Our 10th. A decade. It was a number that felt solid, substantial, a monument to our shared history. I woke up early, determined to make it special. In a long marriage, you learn that it's the small, deliberate gestures that matter most, the conscious efforts to remember the beginning. I had breakfast ready when she came downstairs. Pancakes, her favorite, freshly squeezed orange juice, and a card, one I'd spent an hour picking out. Its words a clumsy but sincere attempt to articulate a decade of love. Sophia walked into the kitchen in her silk robe, her hair still tousled from sleep, and gave me a warm, genuine smile. "Happy anniversary," I said, leaning in to kiss her. "Happy anniversary," she replied, her voice soft and sweet. For a moment, just for a moment, everything felt normal. It felt like we were still the couple who used to surprise each other with post-it notes on the bathroom mirror, who would dance in the kitchen to old soul songs while the pasta water boiled. But beneath the surface, beneath the warm pancakes and the sweet orange juice, something felt off. A low, discordant hum. The day unfolded quietly. Sophia said she had a few errands to run, a few last-minute preparations for the special dinner she was planning for us that evening. "Don't worry," she said, flashing her usual confident, capable smile. "I've got everything under control." I didn't question it. I wanted to trust her. I needed to trust her. While she was out, I stayed home, putting the final touches on a small gift I'd been working on for weeks, a custom-bound photo album of our favorite moments together. As I carefully placed the last picture, a candid shot from our honeymoon, both of us laughing, sun-kissed, and impossibly young, a wave of profound nostalgia and a deep, aching sadness washed over me. The people in these pictures, they felt like strangers, like characters in a story I had once read and loved, but whose ending I could no longer remember. Sophia came back late in the afternoon, her arms full of grocery bags and a bouquet of her favorite peonies. Chris followed close behind her, carrying a case of wine and a bag of what looked like candles. He was a shadow she couldn't seem to shake. "Chris is helping me set up," she announced casually, brushing past me with a flurry of activity. I forced a smile, a grim, muscular effort that felt more like a grimace. "Of course he is," I muttered under my breath. The two of them moved around the kitchen like a well-rehearsed dance troupe, their movements fluid, synchronized. They laughed and chatted as they prepared the meal, their easy, familiar chemistry a physical presence in the room. I tried to busy myself with other tasks, setting the table, lighting the fireplace, but their connection was impossible to ignore. It was a closed circuit, a private club with a membership of 2. I was a guest in my own home, on my own anniversary. As the evening progressed, the unease in my chest grew heavier, a physical weight. It wasn't just the way Chris would lean in when he spoke to her, his voice a low, intimate murmur. It wasn't just the way her laughter seemed louder, more uninhibited, when he was around. It was the way they excluded me, not with overt actions, but with 1,000 small, subtle omissions. They were a team, and I was the spectator. Dinner was served, a beautiful, elaborate meal that I couldn't taste. I tried to push my doubts aside. This was our anniversary, a celebration of us. But even as we ate, I felt like a third wheel. Chris dominated the conversation, telling stories from their shared childhood, cracking jokes that had Sophia in stitches. I sipped my wine, forcing myself to laugh along, a hollow, echoing sound in the dining room, while a bitter, silent resentment bubbled beneath the surface. It wasn't until dessert that everything finally, irrevocably, came crashing down. I had stepped away from the table to grab the cake, a beautiful, decadent chocolate creation that was her favorite, from the fridge. As I turned to walk back into the kitchen, I froze in the doorway. There they were, Sophia and Chris, locked in a kiss. It wasn't a friendly peck on the cheek. It wasn't an innocent, drunken gesture. It was a deep, passionate, lingering kiss that spoke of a history I was not a part of a future I would not be included in. It was a kiss that left no room for misinterpretation, no space for denial. For a long, silent moment, the world seemed to tilt on its axis. The sounds of the house, the crackle of the fire, the soft music playing from the speakers, all faded into a deafening roar in my ears. My hands went numb. The cake, our anniversary cake, almost slipped from my grip. What the hell is this? I finally managed to choke out, my voice a raw, ragged sound I didn't recognize as my own. Sophia jerked away from him, her face a pale, chalky mask of shock and guilt. Derek, it's not. It's nothing, man. Chris interrupted, his tone infuriatingly casual, almost smug. He wiped his mouth with the back of his hand. Just a friendly anniversary kiss. I saw red. The carefully constructed dam of my self-control, which had been straining for months under the pressure of 1,000 small betrayals, finally burst. Without thinking, I dropped the cake on the counter with a thud and lunged at him. My fist connected with his jaw. The crack of bone against bone echoed in the small, silent kitchen. Chris stumbled backward, clutching his face, a look of stunned surprise in his eyes. Sophia screamed, a high, piercing sound. Derek, stop. But I didn't stop. Years of frustration, of feeling like an outsider in my own life, of suppressed anger and a heartbreak I hadn't even allowed myself to name, poured out of me in that single, violent moment. How dare you? I shouted, my voice trembling with a rage so profound it felt like it would tear me apart. How dare you come into my home, on my anniversary, and do this? Chris mumbled something incoherent, his words slurred from the pain, a trickle of blood at the corner of his mouth. Sophia stood between us, tears streaming down her face, her hands held out, pleading with me to calm down. I took a step back, my chest heaving, the adrenaline beginning to recede, leaving a cold, hollow emptiness in its wake. I looked at the broken man on my floor, and then at the weeping woman who was my wife. I'm done, I said, my voice low but firm. Final. This, whatever this is, it's over. And with that, I grabbed my keys from the hook by the door and walked out, leaving behind the wreckage of our anniversary, the wreckage of our marriage. I left behind the woman I thought I knew, and the friend I thought I could trust. As I drove away into the cold, indifferent night, the weight of what I had just witnessed, of what I had just done, began to sink in. My hands gripped the steering wheel, my knuckles white. My mind raced with 1,000 questions I wasn't sure I wanted the answers to. How long had this been going on? How could she do this to me? To us? One thing was clear. The life I thought we had built, the beautiful, solid, picture-perfect life, had been a lie. It was a fragile, hollow thing, and it had just been shattered in an instant. And there was no going back. I don't remember much of the drive. My mind was a chaotic, high-speed collision of images and emotions. The look of shock on Sophia's face, the smug, infuriating smirk on Chris's, the sickening crack of my fist against his jaw, the slow, silent slide of the anniversary cake off the counter and onto the floor. I was on autopilot, my body just a machine carrying my shattered consciousness through the dark, indifferent streets. I ended up at my sister Angela's house. I hadn't consciously decided to go there. My car had just found its way, a homing pigeon seeking a safe harbor in a storm. She answered the door in her pajamas, her face a mixture of confusion and concern that quickly sharpened into alarm as she took in my disheveled state, my wild eyes, the raw, scraped skin on my knuckles. Derek? What happened? She asked, stepping aside to let me in without waiting for an answer. I couldn't find the words right away. I stumbled into her living room and collapsed onto the couch, the sturdy, comfortable sofa that had been a silent witness to a decade of family milestones. My throat felt tight, my chest burned. Finally, I managed to choke out the words, a broken, disjointed epitaph for my marriage. Sophia. Chris. I caught them. Kissing. Angela's face darkened with a fierce, protective fury that was instantly followed by a deep, profound sadness. That bastard, she muttered, pulling me into a tight, fierce hug. I always knew there was something wrong with him. She held me for a long moment, then pulled back, her expression resolute. You're staying here tonight. No arguments. That night was a blur. I sat on her couch, staring blankly at the wall, while she made tea and tried to comfort me, her presence a solid, unwavering anchor in my swirling chaos. Her husband, Mark, gave me a knowing, empathetic nod as he passed by, sensing that words were useless at a time like this. When I finally managed to tell Angela everything, the slow build-up of suspicion, the inside jokes, the way he had inserted himself into our lives, the final, brutal scene in the kitchen, her reaction was exactly what I expected and exactly what I needed. I always had a bad feeling about him, she said, pacing the room like a caged tiger. He's always been too close to her, Derek. Too familiar. And Sophia? How could she? On your anniversary, of all days. In your own home. Her words were both a bomb and a blade. I needed the validation, the confirmation that I wasn't crazy. But hearing someone else say it, hearing my worst fears given voice, made it all feel terrifyingly, irrevocably real. Over the next few days, I stayed with Angela and Mark, a refugee in my own life, trying to piece myself back together. The guest room became my bunker. Sophia called and texted nonstop, her messages a frantic, desperate barrage of apologies, excuses, and pleas for me to come home. Derek, I'm so sorry. It didn't mean anything. It was a mistake, I swear, asterisk. Please, let me explain. We can fix this, asterisk. Don't throw away 10 years over one stupid moment, asterisk. I read every message, a hollow ache in my chest growing with each one. Asterisk a mistake. A stupid moment. Asterisk her words were a gross, insulting understatement of the profound, systematic betrayal that had been unfolding for months, for years. I didn't reply. What was there to say? She had made her choices. Now, I had to make mine. Liam came over a few days later, a six-pack of beer in his hand, and his usual blunt, no-nonsense honesty in his eyes. So, he said, cracking open a beer and handing it to me. What's the plan? I don't know. I admitted, my voice hoarse. I don't even know where to start. He leaned back in his chair, studying me. Start by figuring out what you want, man. Do you want to try to fix this? Or are you done? The question hung heavy in the air between us. I wanted to scream that I was done, that I could never forgive her, that the image of her kissing him was seared onto my brain like a brand. But a part of me, a weak, foolish, stubborn part, still clung to the memories of who we used to be, to the life we had built, to the woman I thought I had married. She's been calling, I said finally, the words a quiet confession, saying it was a mistake, that it didn't mean anything. Liam scoffed, a short, sharp, incredulous sound. Didn't mean anything? Derek, you don't kiss someone like that. Not with that kind of history, if it doesn't mean something. Don't let her gaslight you. Don't let her minimize this. I nodded, knowing he was right. But knowing and accepting were two very different things. Meanwhile, Angela, my ever-vigilant sister, had insisted I start therapy. At first, it felt strange, clinical, sitting in a quiet, sunlit room with a stranger and spilling out the darkest, most painful thoughts of my life. But Dr. Patel, a woman with a calm, insightful gaze, had a way of cutting through the noise in my head. What are you feeling, right now, in this moment? She asked during our first session. Angry, I said, without hesitation. Betrayed. Lost. Confused. She nodded. And what do you want to feel? That question stopped me in my tracks. I didn't have an answer. While I was trying to heal, Sophia was facing her own fallout. Angela, my sister the detective, heard through the inevitable gossip of mutual friends that Chris had filed a police report against me for assault, claiming I had broken his jaw. It was the cherry on top of an already disastrous Sunday. He's calling you unstable, Derek, Angela said one evening, her voice dripping with disgust, saying you overreacted, that it was all innocent. Of course he is, I muttered. He's a coward. And Sophia? She was caught in the middle. Chris, in a transparent act of self-preservation, had stopped talking to her completely. The friends who had once admired her, who had been a part of our shared life, were now whispering behind her back. Sophia called again one night, and this time, for reasons I still don't fully understand, I picked up. "Derek?" she said, her voice trembling. Can we talk?" I hesitated, then sighed, a sound of profound weariness. "Fine. Tomorrow." Neutral ground. The next day, we met at a quiet, anonymous cafe. She looked tired, her usual radiant glow replaced by dark circles and a strained, haunted expression. "I'm sorry," she began, tears already pooling in her eyes. "I don't know what I was thinking. It was a mistake. A horrible, stupid mistake." I listened, my face a blank, unreadable mask, as she poured out her regrets, her apologies, her desperate, tangled explanations. "I know I hurt you," she said, her voice breaking. "I will do anything to make it right. Just please don't give up on us." I took a deep breath, the air in my lungs feeling heavy, stale. "Sophia," I said, my voice steady but firm. "You made your choices. You chose him, you chose to lie, you chose to betray me. And now, I have to make mine." I stood up, leaving my untouched coffee on the table. "I need time. I need space. I can't promise you anything right now." Her tears fell freely, but I stood firm. I wasn't ready to forgive, and I wasn't sure I ever would be. As I walked out of the cafe, leaving her alone with her tears and her regrets, I felt a strange, unsettling mix of emotions. There was pain, there was anger, but there was also a sliver of something else. A sliver of relief. For the first time, in a long time, I was putting myself first. And that, I realized, was a start. The aftermath of that night felt like stepping into a storm I hadn't prepared for. I moved out of the house and into my sister Angela's guest room, leaving Sophia behind in the home we had built together, a home that now felt like a crime scene. It wasn't just about the physical space. It was about finding clarity, about stepping away from the memories and the betrayal that had consumed me. Angela, ever the protective older sibling, didn't mince her words. "You need to focus on yourself now, Derek," she said, handing me a cup of hot, strong coffee one morning. Let her deal with the mess she created. Easier said than done. The silence in Angela's house was deafening, giving my thoughts plenty of room to roam, to circle, to torment me. I replayed that night in the kitchen over and over again, dissecting every detail. The way their bodies were angled towards each other, the look of shock and guilt on Sophia's face, Chris's smug, infuriating smirk. It all haunted me, a bad dream I couldn't wake up from. Sophia, of course, didn't stay silent. The calls and messages started almost immediately, a relentless barrage of digital penance. "Derek, please talk to me. Asterisk. It was a mistake. I swear it didn't mean anything. Asterisk. I love you. Don't throw away 10 years because of one stupid moment. Asterisk." At first, I ignored her, letting the messages pile up like unread emails, a testament to her desperate, belated remorse. But each notification, each buzz of my phone, was a small, sharp paper cut on my already wounded soul. The hardest part wasn't the anger. The anger was a clean, hot, righteous fire that kept me warm. The hardest part was the grief. The profound, hollowed-out loss of the life I thought we had, the woman I thought she was. Liam dropped by a few days later, a six-pack of beer under his arm, and dragged me out of the house. He listened as I vented, his expression a familiar, comforting mixture of sympathy and frustration. "You can't keep stewing in this, man," he said, clinking his bottle against mine. "She messed up. Big time. But sitting here, replaying it in your head, isn't going to fix anything." "What am I supposed to do, Liam?" I asked, my voice heavy with an exhaustion that went bone deep. "Pretend it didn't happen? Just move on like it's nothing?" "No," he said firmly, his gaze steady. "You face it. You feel it. And then you figure out what you want. Whether that's forgiveness, or closure, or just a clean break. But you can't let her control the narrative. You can't let her make you the crazy, jealous husband." He was right, of course. Liam usually was. But knowing what to do and actually being able to do it were two very different things. Meanwhile, Sophia's world was unraveling in its own way. Angela, who seemed to have a direct line to every piece of gossip in our social circle, kept me updated. The police report Chris had filed against me for assault was, ironically, backfiring on him. Everyone knows what really happened. Derek," Angela told me one evening, her voice a mixture of satisfaction and disgust. "They know he was kissing you, wife, in your kitchen, on your anniversary. He's the one who looks like a slimy, pathetic snake, not you." Chris, it seemed, was feeling the backlash. He had made himself scarce, avoiding social events, his transparent attempt to paint himself as the victim falling flat. And Sophia? Sophia was feeling the consequences of her actions. Her friends, the ones who had once been so unwaveringly loyal, were starting to distance themselves. "She's trying to explain it away," Angela said, saying it was a moment of weakness, that it didn't mean anything. But people aren't buying it. They saw how close she and Chris were. They saw it for months. Hearing this didn't bring me the satisfaction I thought it would. If anything, it just made me feel sad. Sad that our marriage, our life, had become the subject of whispers and speculation. Sad that the woman I had loved, the woman I had built a life with, had brought all of this on herself. The turning point came when Sophia called again, her voice a trembling, desperate thread on the other end of the line. And this time, I answered. "Derek," she began, her voice choked with tears. "I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I need to explain." I let her talk. Her words tumbled out in a frantic, disjointed rush of apologies and excuses. She sounded broken, desperate, like someone trying to cling to the wreckage of a ship she had deliberately sunk. "I was stupid," she said, her voice cracking. "I let Chris get too close. I enjoyed the attention. I didn't think. I didn't realize how far it had gone, until it was too late." I stayed silent, letting her fill the void. "I love you," she continued, her voice barely above a whisper. "I've always loved you. Please, please don't give up on us." Her words hung heavy in the air, but they didn't pierce the armor I had built around myself. They were just words. And words, I was learning, were cheap. "Sophia," I said finally, my own voice steady, firm. "You made your choices. You chose to lie to me, to deceive me, to betray me. And now, I have to make mine." She cried. She begged. She pleaded. But I didn't waver. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt a sense of clarity. Not closure, not forgiveness, but a cold, hard clarity. I couldn't go back. Not after everything. As I hung up the phone, I felt a strange and profound mix of emotions. There was relief. There was a deep, lingering sadness. But there was also the faintest, most fragile glimmer of hope. This wasn't the life I had planned. But maybe, just maybe, it was the life I needed to rebuild. One painful, deliberate step at a time. The news of our separation spread through our social circle with the speed and destructive force of a wildfire. Within days, it seemed that everyone, family, friends, even casual acquaintances, had their own version of what had happened, their own opinion, their own judgment. It wasn't just my marriage that had fallen apart. It felt like my privacy had been publicly executed as well. At first, the reactions were subtle. Friends texting to check in. Family members calling under the guise of just wanting to say hi. But eventually, the real questions, the ones lurking just beneath the surface of their polite condolences, started to emerge. Asterisk, what happened, Derek? Is it true about Chris and Sophia? Are you okay? Asterisk. I wasn't okay. But I didn't have the energy to explain the full, sordid, heartbreaking story to everyone who asked. Angela, as always, was fiercely, unapologetically protective. She became my gatekeeper, my shield. She called out anyone who even hinted at blaming me for the situation. "Don't you dare try to pin this on my brother," she snapped at one of our mutual friends, Kate, during an awkward group dinner. "He's the one who got betrayed, not the other way around." Kate, a woman who had always prided herself on her ability to see both sides, raised her hands defensively. "I'm not saying it's his fault. I'm just saying, maybe he could have seen it coming. They were always so close." Angela's glare could have melted steel. And what, exactly, was he supposed to do, Kate? Babysit his wife and her so-called best friend every second of the day? Give me a break. I didn't say much during these confrontations, but Angela's unwavering, unconditional support meant more to me than I could ever put into words. Liam, on the other hand, took a more straightforward, pragmatic approach. "Forget the gossip, man," he said one night, as we sat on his porch, drinking beer and watching the city lights. "People will talk. They'll have their theories. And then, in a week, they'll move on to the next piece of drama. Focus on yourself, not on what anyone else thinks. His advice was solid, but it was hard to ignore the whispers, especially when they came from people I had once considered close friends. Not everyone sided with me. Sophia's sister, Rachel, was one of the first to reach out, and her tone was anything but sympathetic. "Derek, I know you're upset," she said during a tense, stilted phone call. "But don't you think you're overreacting? It was just a kiss. She made a mistake. She's only human." I clenched my jaw, struggling to keep my voice calm. "It wasn't just a kiss, Rachel. It was a betrayal. On our anniversary. In our home. She loves you," Rachel insisted, her voice rising with a defensive, sisterly loyalty. "She's been beating herself up over this. Don't throw away 10 years of marriage because of one lapse in judgment." "Lapse in judgment," I repeated, my voice now as cold as ice. "She kissed another man, her best friend, in our kitchen, Rachel. And then he had the audacity to tell me it was friendly. How am I supposed to move past that?" Rachel sighed, a sound of pure frustration, but she didn't press further. Still, her words lingered, a poisonous little seed of doubt, making me question whether I was being too rigid, too unforgiving. The most surprising and most hurtful reactions came from some of our mutual friends. Some, like our friend Greg, were unequivocally supportive. He pulled me aside during a gathering to say, "You didn't deserve this, man. If she couldn't see what she had in you, that's on her, not you." But others were less kind, their sympathies subtly, poisonously skewed. "Derek," Kate said, during another awkward group dinner, "I get that you're hurt, but don't you think punching Chris was a bit extreme? Violence doesn't solve anything." I set down my fork and took a deep breath, the air in my lungs feeling thin, insufficient. "What would you have done, Kate?" I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. "If you had walked in on your husband kissing your best friend, would you have just shrugged it off?" Offered them a drink. She stammered, clearly uncomfortable, but didn't have an answer. Even within Sophia's own social circle, cracks were beginning to show. Angela told me that some of her friends, the ones who had once worshipped her, were now whispering about the incident, speculating about how long it had been going on, about whether Chris was the only one. "Sophia's not in a great place right now," Angela admitted, not with sympathy, but with a kind of grim satisfaction. "She's losing friends left and right. And Chris? He's completely ghosted her. He's a coward. He lit the match and then ran away from the fire." The thought of Sophia, alone, facing the fallout of her actions, didn't bring me the satisfaction I thought it might. If anything, it just made me feel empty. Sad for what we'd lost. Sad for the woman I thought I knew. Sad for the life we had built, a life that now felt like a distant, half-forgotten dream. At the end of the day, it became clear that everyone had an opinion, but no one truly understood what I was going through. The betrayal wasn't just about the kiss. It was about the slow, systematic erosion of trust, of loyalty, of the very foundation of a relationship I had thought was unshakable. As Liam had said, people would talk, and eventually, they would move on. But for me, the healing process was just beginning. And that was a journey no one else could take for me. The call came late one evening, catching me off guard. I had been trying, with some small measure of success, to rebuild some semblance of normalcy. I was throwing myself into my work, hitting the gym with a renewed, almost punitive, intensity. I had even picked up an old, neglected hobby of sketching, filling pages with charcoal drawings of landscapes and buildings, anything to keep my mind occupied, to keep the ghosts at bay. So when my phone buzzed and I saw Sophia's name flash on the screen, I hesitated. A part of me, the part that was finally starting to heal, wanted to let it ring out, to keep her voice, her presence, on the other side of the carefully constructed wall I had built around myself. But another part of me, a part one didn't want to admit existed, curiosity, maybe, or a foolish, lingering sense of responsibility, got the better of me. I answered. "Derek?" she began, her voice shaky, uncertain. It was a far cry from the confident, polished, vibrant woman I had once married. "What do you want, Sophia?" I asked, my tone sharper than I had intended. I need to talk to you," she said. "In person, please." The silence stretched between us, heavy and loaded. Against my better judgment, I agreed. "Fine. Tomorrow." The coffee shop near Angela's place. The next day, I arrived early, settling into a small, anonymous corner table where I could see the door. I wasn't sure what I was expecting, but when Sophia walked in, I barely recognized her. She looked diminished, tired. Her makeup was minimal, her clothes less put together than usual. There was a tension in her posture, a fragility that hadn't been there before. She spotted me and offered a tentative, hesitant smile before sitting down across from me. "Thanks for meeting me," she said softly, her hands fidgeting with the edge of her sleeve. "Get to the point," I replied, my tone neutral, a carefully constructed facade of indifference. Her eyes darted around the cafe before she finally spoke, her voice a low, trembling whisper. "Derek, I made a mistake. A huge, catastrophic mistake. And now, I don't even know how to fix it." I raised an eyebrow, folding my arms across my chest. "What's going on, Sophia?" It's Chris," she admitted, her voice trembling. After everything. I tried to talk to him, to understand. But he's turned on me. He's blaming me for everything. For the fight, for the rumors, for the fact that his girlfriend broke up with him. I stared at her, trying to process what she was saying. A dark, bitter part of me felt a grim sense of vindication. She had chosen him, and now he was showing her his true colors. "And now you're regretting your choices?" I asked, unable to keep the bitterness out of my voice. Tears welled up in her eyes, and she nodded. "Yes, Derek, I am. I regret everything. Letting him get too close. Flirting with him. Betraying you. I let myself get caught up in the attention, in the excitement of it all. I let my guard down, and I destroyed everything we had. For a moment, I let the silence stretch between us, watching as she crumbled under the weight of her own guilt. I trusted you, Sophia," I said finally, my voice steady, but filled with the weight of a decade of pain. "I trusted you with everything. And you threw it away. For what? For a cheap thrill? For a little bit of attention from a man who was never your friend?" She shook her head desperately. "It wasn't about that. I wasn't thinking. I thought it was harmless. But I see now, I see how wrong I was. I let him manipulate me, and I hurt you in ways I can never take back." Her tears spilled over, but I didn't reach out to comfort her. I couldn't. "I'm sorry, Derek," she whispered. "I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I need you to know how much I regret everything." I leaned back in my chair, exhaling a long, slow breath. "Regret doesn't erase what happened, Sophia. It doesn't fix the betrayal. It doesn't change the fact that you prioritized him, his friendship, his attention, over our marriage." Her face crumpled, and for a moment, just a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Is there any chance we can rebuild this?" she asked, her voice barely audible, a last, desperate plea. I shook my head, a slow, deliberate movement. "Trust isn't something you can patch up with an apology, Sophia. It's earned, day by day, over years. And you shattered it. In an instant." She nodded, wiping her tears with a trembling hand. "I understand." As I walked out of that coffee shop, leaving her alone with her regrets, I felt a strange and profound mix of emotions. There was closure. There was a deep, lingering sadness. And there was a strange sense of relief. I wasn't sure what the future held. But for the first time in months, I felt like I was finally, truly, taking control of my own life again. Whatever happened to Sophia from here, whatever battles she had to fight with Chris, with her friends, with herself, that was her responsibility, not mine. She had made her choices. She had made her mistakes. And now, she would have to face the consequences. As for me, it was time to start moving forward. Alone, but, for the first time in a long time, with a sense of my own strength. After our conversation at the coffee shop, I thought I'd feel a sense of closure, a clean break. I had said my piece, laid everything out on the table, and walked away. But closure, I was learning, isn't something that comes in a single, neat package. It lingers, it twists, it turns in ways you don't expect. Sophia's world continued to unravel. I learned, through the inevitable whispers and casual updates from mutual friends, that Chris, the man she had defended so many times, the man whose friendship she had prioritized over our marriage, had turned on her completely. His charm, it seemed, was nothing but a mask, a tool of manipulation. And now that she was no longer a useful, willing participant in his games, he was making her life a living hell. "He's spreading lies about me, Derek," she told me in one of her late-night, whiskey-fueled voicemails, a new, desperate habit she had acquired. He's telling people that I was the one who pursued him, that I was the one who was unhappy in our marriage, that I was the one who crossed the line. He's painting me as the villain, and himself as the innocent victim. I listened to her words without responding, my own emotions a toxic, churning swirl of vindication and a deep, weary sadness. I had warned her about Chris, hadn't I? I had seen the way he looked at her, the subtle, possessive way he inserted himself into our lives. But she hadn't listened. She had chosen to believe in his charm, in their special connection. And now, she was reaping the consequences of her choices. The real fallout came when her colleagues, the people in her professional world, started to distance themselves. Angela, who seemed to have a direct, unimpeachable line to every rumor in our social circle, filled me in on the details. People at her event planning company are talking, Derek, Angela said one evening, her voice a mixture of pity and a grim, sisterly satisfaction. Some of them are siding with her, saying Chris is a predator. But others are questioning her integrity, her judgment. It's messy. She's struggling. She should have seen it coming. I replied, my voice harsher than I intended. Angela looked at me carefully over the rim of her wine glass. Maybe, but that doesn't mean it's easy for her now. I didn't respond. I wasn't ready to feel pity for Sophia. Not yet. Despite everything, despite the walls I had built, Sophia kept reaching out. Her text messages were filled with apologies and regret, each one more desperate, more self-flagellating than the last. I know I let him manipulate me. I see now how toxic he was. But I didn't realize it until it was too late. Asterisk. I'm sorry for everything, Derek. For hurting you. For destroying us. Please, believe me. Asterisk. I wanted to believe her. A part of me, a deep, stubborn, foolish part, still cared for the woman I had loved, the woman I had built a life with. But the damage was too deep, the trust too shattered. Her realization had come too late. Her final attempt to reach me, to bridge the chasm that now lay between us, came in the form of a letter. Handwritten. Thoughtful. Raw. Derek, asterisk it began. I don't expect your forgiveness. I don't expect anything from you. But I need you to know that I am truly, deeply, and irrevocably sorry. I let myself get caught up in something I thought I could control. I let myself believe that his attention, his friendship, was more important than our marriage. And I lost sight of what mattered most. You. Us. I don't know if I will ever forgive myself for what I did. But I hope, one day, you can find it in your heart to forgive me. Asterisk. I read the letter twice, then a third time, before folding it carefully and putting it in a drawer. It wasn't forgiveness she needed. It was accountability. And forgiveness, if it ever came, if it was even possible, wasn't something I was ready to give. Sophia's fall was complete. But it was not my responsibility to catch her. She had made her choices. She had walked down a path of her own making. And now, she had to live with the consequences. As for me, I was done looking back. The road ahead was still uncertain, still lonely. But for the first time, it felt like my own. The day the divorce was finalized felt strangely quiet, almost anticlimactic. There was no dramatic showdown, no explosive arguments, no tearful recriminations. There were just signatures on paper, a few cold, legal formalities, and the unspoken, final acknowledgement that the life we had built together, the life that had once been the center of my universe, was officially, irrevocably over. Walking out of the courthouse into the crisp, clear air of a late autumn afternoon, I felt a strange and profound mix of emotions. There was relief, a deep, physical sense of a heavy weight being lifted from my shoulders. There was a lingering sadness, a quiet, gentle mourning for the man I used to be, for the future I had once so clearly envisioned. And there was a strange, terrifying sense of liberation. The weight of betrayal, of anger, of a constant, gnawing uncertainty had finally been lifted. For the first time in what felt like a lifetime, I felt like I could start to focus on myself, on what lay ahead. Rebuilding wasn't easy, but it was necessary. At first, the days felt hollow, unstructured, like I was simply going through the motions. Work became my anchor. I poured myself into my architectural projects, taking on new, challenging commissions, reconnecting with colleagues I had drifted from. The structure, the logic, the clean lines of my work helped to give me a sense of purpose when everything else felt chaotic and undefined. Liam, my best friend, my rock, became my unofficial therapist. "You need to get out of your own head, man," he said one evening, practically dragging me to a local hiking group he had recently joined. At first, I resisted. Socializing, making small talk with strangers, felt like the last thing I wanted to do. But standing on a windswept mountaintop, the crisp, clean air filling my lungs, the city a distant, miniature world below, I realized how much I had needed it. The outdoors became my escape, a way to remind myself that life was bigger than my pain, that the world was still full of beauty and wonder. It was during one of those hikes that I met Emily. She wasn't flashy or overly charismatic, like Sophia. She was grounded, down to earth, with a quiet, easy confidence that immediately put me at ease. She was a high school history teacher, passionate about her students and her work. Her laughter was warm, genuine, and for the first time in a very long time, I felt a spark. Not a blazing, world-tilting fire, but a quiet, comforting warmth. Over the next few weeks, we crossed paths at more group events. Our conversations flowed effortlessly. I found myself looking forward to seeing her, to hearing her stories about her students, to listening to her unique, insightful perspective on the world. Emily wasn't trying to fill the gaps Sophia had left. She was simply, gently, showing me that life could and would move forward. As I sat on my small apartment balcony one evening, watching the sun dip below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, I reflected on everything that had happened. The betrayal, the heartbreak, the anger, it had all shaped me. It had all changed me, but it no longer defined me. Sophia had been a part of my life, a significant, defining part. And the scars she had left, they would always be there. But they were no longer open, weeping wounds. They were reminders. Reminders of lessons learned. I had learned to value myself, to set boundaries, to recognize my own worth. The future felt uncertain, but for the first time, that uncertainty didn't scare me. I wasn't looking for answers or closure anymore. I was simply ready to embrace whatever came next. Meeting Emily hadn't erased the past, but it had reminded me that life goes on, that there is beauty in starting over, in rediscovering who you are, in learning what you want. And as I sat there, the first stars of the evening beginning to appear in the darkening sky, I realized I wasn't just moving on. I was moving forward. And that, I thought, was more than enough.